program. It's kind of our bread and butter that we started way back in around 2005. And I'll kind of touch upon CALGreen, which is the green building code in California, how we compare it to that, and then provide some examples of some green building practices we've seen. Just kind of goes through the agenda for today. So we're a nonprofit organization. We started back around 2005 as kind of a collection of building experts and individuals who really had an interest for green building. This was before there were any green building code or guidelines. So these individuals came together and really wanted to create guidelines to help others in the industry pursue that green building. GreenPoint Rated was developed as that kind of certification guideline system. And while creating it, we really tried to ensure that it was credible and accessible so that anyone could use it. And we've worked within the building industry for both third-party verifiers. We work with builders and homeowners to just ensure that homes are being built in the best way possible. One of the areas that we really started out with was working with local governments. When the governments were interested in creating green building codes, many of them, especially in the Bay Area, adopted GreenPoint Rated as that guideline to build. Once CALGreen was established, which I'll get into in a little bit, we continued to build off of CALGreen, and governments have continued to adopt our guidelines to help kind of pave the way for kind of future code cycles. Every year we put on green building trainings. Those range from introductory courses about kind of what green building is and giving some examples, all the way to our GreenPoint Radar series, which is much more in-depth and teaches professionals on how to do third-party verifications. And then last but not least, we work within the public realm just to increase public awareness on the value and benefits of green homes and educating those consumers. So we believe that green homes matter because at the end of the day, if they're built right and they're built to last a while, they're going to last long. They're going to cost less to operate if less energy is used, less water is consumed. And we really want to ensure that the aim of the building is not to harm people's health, so that they're built healthy. Other goals of the green buildings include, reducing carbon emissions, so we ultimately are protected from global warming. Conserving resources, we're not overusing resources, we're using them smartly when we build. And just overall improving that built environment for not just people, but for communities. One of the reasons we focus on buildings is just because buildings make up a large part of global greenhouse gas emissions, around 40%. So retrofitting existing buildings and building green new construction is just a key way to help fight climate change. These are the areas we look at when we look in terms of green buildings. Using energy wisely, so reducing the overall consumption the home uses, and that can range from just building it correctly so that it's just naturally using less energy, and it can range from including renewables to offset that consumption. Also, using water well, so putting in low water fixtures, so like low flow shower heads, low flow bathroom faucets, even putting in potentially a gray water system to capture water that was used, but then reusing it for like landscaping. We look at indoor air quality. So we try to promote materials that contain low VOC. So that can range from the type of insulation that's used in the home. It can also be a part of the paint that's utilized, making sure that all of those materials are designed to really ensure that the air quality within the home is safe. Resource conservation. So whenever construction takes place, a lot of materials, end up being discarded. So we try to promote planning for how to best um, get rid of those materials, primarily through reuse or recycling them, and making sure that the building is built with durable materials so that they last longer. You're not constantly having to replace the materials within the home. And then at the bottom, just plan for a livable community. Make sure that there's community benefits ranging from cleaner air due to maybe reduced traffic congestion, that when the project is being planned, those things are being taken into account, that there's not going to be a bunch of traffic, finding ways for residents to easily get around the community, and just making sure that there's recreational opportunities around the project. So again, the main points we kind of look at are better for the environment, healthier for the occupants, and just having a less demand on the full infrastructure. So there's different asset values to green building. From a developer standpoint, they may want to promote green building just because there's a higher sales price on having that green label with their project. That can lead to quicker sales. Once once the project really is involved and looks at how to implement all of the features, it can lead to a lower design and construction costs. And then the greatest benefit is just having that built-in verification. When a project is third-party certified, you have an additional party ensuring that it's built correctly, and any issues that are going along during construction can be pointed out and remedied quickly. From an owner standpoint, they may have the ability to secure better finance rates if they have a green certification or a green building. It could have an increased market value. We've seen studies where homes with green labels do sell for a premium. And even having reduced vacancy if it's, for example, a rental unit. And then another benefit for both an owner or a tenant is just having lower refurbishment costs, having that image, the prestige value of a green building, and meeting both corporate or responsibility goals, especially around greenhouse gas emissions and energy use. Again, like if you're an owner and you want to own a green building, you could potentially have slower depreciation, increased occupancy rates if it's a rental, lower exit yields. Tenants may seek out green certification buildings just because they could be concerned about their health and they want to ensure that it was built to have low VOCs within the air of the home. Which could lead to increased productivity. And then if it's a tenant, just lower maintenance costs, lower operating costs, and reduced downtime potentially. So this kind of gets into CALGreen. So CALGreen was the first mandatory green building code within the United States. It was really developed around 2007 by the California Building Standard Commission. And the biggest goal of it was to create a sustainable way to build effectively while also trying to meet the goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions established by Assembly Bill 32. It's updated every 3 years. So the last version is essentially the 2019 code, which was released and it has been into effect January 1st, 2020. There's mandatory measures within CALGreen. Again, it's a building code, so it is mandatory. Some measures may not be applicable just based on the project type. There's some that are very oriented towards multifamily, while others would definitely be more towards single family. And there's also tiers to CALGreen. Basic CALGreen is mandatory everywhere in California. And then tier 1 and tier 2s are a step above that's mandatory measure, which some jurisdictions adopt and then require. The main sections of CALGreen are planning and design, so that can take into account having EV charging stations on site, taking into account storm drainage, essentially making sure that the project site can accommodate that storm drainage and allow some infiltration. The biggest part when people think about code is the energy efficiency, which is to meet Title 24 energy code. It's a specific energy code that California has that requires kind of a minimum energy efficiency per building. There's a water efficiency cycle, which calls out some requirements to conserve water use. And that can range from just kind of individual fixture fitting requirements all the way to some landscaping ordinances. There is a material conservation requirement. So if construction is taking place, there is a certain amount of waste that needs to be recycled or reused. They take into account indoor air quality. So as discussed, having some certain VOC limits around some components of the home, such as paint, carpets, flooring, and HVAC design. And then having some installer and special inspection requirements to ensure that these components of the home are actually being built correctly. So that kind of leads into what is GreenPoint Rated? So we're a certification standards and rating system for residential buildings. We focus just on residential. We do not do commercial. The most comparable certification to us would be LEED certification. And as such, we are a consumer label tied to that third-party verification. We have a checklist of best green practices. Some measures in our checklist are required, but the majority of them are kind of an optional pick and choose, if you would, where you find the best practices that would be applicable to your project, and then you would obtain points for achieving those. We have local governments that do utilize GreenPoint Rated as a local ordinance just because it's easy to plug and play that. We build upon CALGreen. So it's a way for local jurisdictions to ensure that not only CALGreen is being met, but that their goals for greenhouse gas emissions are being obtained for the residential sector. So again, it's a complementary to LEED for homes. We have different sections of points that one can obtain points for in different categories. And it was based in California and grown on in this area. One of the things that I would want to point out is we were developed before CALGreen. Yeah, so kind of getting into that plug and play. We developed GreenPoint Rated before CALGreen. Once CALGreen was developed, we aligned a lot of our measures with CALGreen, but went slightly beyond what CALGreen required. So meeting GreenPoint Rated is an easy way to ensure that CALGreen is being met. It's one of our prerequisites, and we build upon some of the measures. A big objective of what we do is just to educate builders and building managers about the benefits of green construction, and just ensuring that there is an overall standard of guidelines that can be met to ensure that the performance is being met for the project. Projects get points in 5 categories. Those are the ones we went over, such as resource conservation, energy, water, IAQ, health. So we want to ensure that those areas of the green building are being met to a minimum specification. So again, the energy, water conservation, indoor air quality, resource conservation, and community. We require a kind of minimum amount of points be met in each of these categories to obtain the certification, just to ensure that the green building is being kind of looked at holistically and not just in like one category. So the GreenPoint Rated system is provided for both new home and existing home projects. And within each of those, we look at both single family and multifamily. With new construction, we have a GreenPoint Radar brought on before the design process. And this integrated design can help minimize costs and just maximize the benefits, and then ensures that there is a third party verifying the construction phase to ensure that it's being built correctly. With the existing home system, buildings of any vintage can get rated. And one of the interesting aspects about existing buildings is that a home can be certified without any additional work being done, as long as it meets our standards. So if an existing home from like 1970 was built extremely well, we could potentially recognize that without them having to do a major rehab. This breaks out the different point categories. So again, we have those kind of different categories of like community, energy, indoor air quality, so on. But then within each of those different categories, we have a minimum set of points that need to be met. And by doing different measures, as we call them, like if you were to put in a high performing shower head, you could obtain some water conservation points. And then we would just need a minimum of 6 if that was a new home project to obtain that requirement. You would do that for each category, but then obtain a minimum of 50 to obtain the certification. We have different levels. So the points range from a minimum of 50 for new home all the way up to 300. And then within each of those point kind of categories, there's levels. And that ranges from certified at the very bottom all the way up to platinum if a project accumulated a lot of points, 140 to 300. Once a project obtains the certification, they get their certificate. And this just demonstrates the differences between an existing home element certification with a new home gold certification. So I'm going to go kind of into a little bit of a comparison between CALGreen and GreenPoint Rated. Again, CalGreen is a minimum requirement of being met to go through our program just because CalGreen is code. And then I'll show you how we then look at what CalGreen requires and then go a bit beyond that. Yep, we got a question. What are some other existing home levels of accomplishment between elements? That's a great question. So elements is kind of our basic certification for existing home. We really see elements as kind of a prescriptive, easy approach to recognize some of the smaller home improvements that can be done in an existing home. And the elements label ranges from 25 points to 49. If the kind of more robust certification for existing home is whole house, and that ranges from 50 on. And that's really oriented towards major rehabilitations or doing some major work within the existing home. Getting back to CalGreen versus GreenPoint Rated. So again, we build upon the code requirements. And on average, we see that homes that are GreenPoint Rated save about 2.1 times more greenhouse gas emissions than buildings just met to code, because they're doing additional work. They're really doing, you know, a significant amount of savings beyond than just what's required. And another benefit is that GreenPoint Rated recognizes those green home measures. So just meaning code, you are just kind of doing what's required, but you're not being recognized. While GreenPoint Rated will recognize that and can provide a green label, which can potentially be valuable for the home. So as an example, there is a construction waste disposal requirement. And this is just if construction is taking place, there's a minimum amount of waste diversion that has to be done. CalGreen currently requires a minimum of 65% of waste be diverted from landfill, so it needs to be recycled or reused. We go a step above that and require a minimum of 70% waste be diverted. Here's an example of just a water fixture in the case of toilets. So CalGreen requires that toilets have a maximum of 1.25 gallons per flush or less. That's code, that's required. We try to take that a step above. We also require that they have a maximum of 1.28 gallons per flush, but then we also want to see that they have a maximum allowed performance or a MAP score of at least 500 grams. So that's kind of an additional test of the toilet to ensure that it can flush correctly. It's not going to require multiple flushes to get to flush anything down. It's essentially going to work with just one flush and not waste additional water. From kind of an IAQ or health standpoint, CalGreen requires a VOC limits for paints and coatings within the home, ranging from 50 gallons per liter to 150 based on the paint type. Well, we really tried to promote lower VOC limits, and we tried to cap them at 5 grams per liter. We got a quick question. Does Title 24 include CALGreen requirements other than those related to energy efficiency? Yes, so CALGreen requires many other things than just energy efficiency. They require water use conservation. There are sections around limits on like VOCs for different types of things used in the home, and that can range from paint to insulation. The best place to find where the code is referenced is the actual building code itself. I don't remember the exact web address, but if you search for CalGreen code, there is a database within California that you can refer to. So we can go over a home that was GreenPoint rated. This one is a multifamily, but a lot of the measures that we have within our system could also be applicable to single family. This project was Villas on the Park in downtown San Jose. They obtained a gold certification, and it was composed of 83 supportive homes or units dedicated to formerly chronically homeless individuals. So some of the requirements that we require, these are the required measures that have to be done for GreenPoint rated, is they have to meet CalGreen. They need to meet the basic building code. We want them to meet ASHRAE standard 62.2, which is essentially a minimum set of required ventilation standards to ensure that fresh air is getting into the home. If there's any shingle roofing, we require that there's a minimum amount of a warranty on it for new construction, obviously. We want GreenPoint rated the checklist to be in the blueprints so that the builder and anyone else who's working on the project can easily refer to those measures and just ensure that they're being incorporated into the design. And then we have the third-party verifier fill out a green appraisal addendum. And this is used if the home is ever sold and needs to be appraised. It helps them see the features within the home and can help incorporate that into the appraisal. In terms of the energy efficiency measures of this specific project, it outperformed Title 24.6 by at least 10%. That's the energy code requirement. They incorporated a solar hot water heater system as well as PV installation. So they were trying to offset their energy use, not just on the kind of plug load and end use electricity, but also the amount of energy that was required to heat the water system. They installed size-efficient Energy Stir refrigerators. We tried to promote that any appliances used within the building are Energy Stir certified and will consume less energy. And then ensuring that all of the hot water pipes are insulated and were correctly installed and verified. In terms of the water conservation measures, they incorporated 3 inches of mulch in the planting beds. This helps retain moisture and requires less frequent watering, really minimizing the amount of turf in the landscape grass consumes a lot of energy, not just in having to water it, but then having to maintain it, using fuel to mow it. So minimizing the amount of that within the landscape. Having water sensed shower heads with 1.8 gallons per minute in the project with a matching compensation valve, ensuring that the water use is minimal. And then central laundry. This is obviously more applicable to multifamily projects, but having the ability for tenants to share a central laundry instead of having laundry within each unit. With indoor air quality measures, they installed insulation that met the CDPH standard method for low emissions. So ensuring that any VOC emissions are either non-existent or extremely minimal. Ensuring that the insulation does not contain fire retardants. That's again around the VOC amounts and lowering them. With the bathroom fans that were installed, seeing that they were energy stored to consume a minimum amount of energy, but then also checking that their airflow rates were correct and that they were able to exchange enough air to vent properly. And then for any flooring that was utilized, ensuring that as well met a VOC emission standard so that that was minimal again, and the air quality was as best as it could. For the resource conservation, they did a 65% waste diversion. That was code. Landscaping, making sure that no invasive species were installed. We like to see native species, plants that are correct for the climate are planted. Making sure that the structural pest and rot controls are built as best as possible. One of the ways you can do that is to locate all of the wood at least 12 inches above the soil, so the potential for it to be damaged or to rot is minimized. Installing insulation with recycled content. So not only identifying insulation that has low VOCs, but then also has recycled content within it. We promote projects that utilize infill sites instead of building upon kind of virgin land. And then also ensuring that the homes are built efficiently. We're not seeing homes that are built extremely large, way larger than they need to be. Larger homes by just in general will consume more energy and water. And that helps conserve resources overall. Some of the community measures that can be met and that were utilized by this project was locating it close to a major transit stop. We count a major transit stop as either a light rail system or a bus stop that is frequently utilized and visited. Having a pedestrian access to services. So if a project is located in an area that someone could easily walk around to meet their usual daily needs and not have to depend on a car, we recognize that and we'll give points for that. Recognizing bicycle storage for residents, as well as reduced parking capacity. Again, really trying to promote walking or using public transportation instead of being so car dependent. And then also, if it was affordable housing, such as in this case, we will provide some recognition for that and provide points. These are some just common upgrades we see on the existing family side. In the building envelope, weather stripping, windows and insulation are the most common, just kind of smaller upgrades. When we see some of the larger upgrades that can take into account HVAC and control integrations, having a hot water system be upgraded to something that's much more efficient, and then lighting and controls, putting in LEDs or dimmers. Appliances, most appliances are going to be much more efficient than they were, like, say, 20 years ago. So just getting a new one by itself will help. But then if one was to go and get one that was actually like Energy Star certified, ensuring that it meets kind of it's operating the best it can and use the least energy. And then just fixture replacements. So putting in low flow devices such as toilets or shower heads, and then doing landscaping and irrigation changes. So we train raters to go out and actually do the verifications. All of them have to have some background in green building and at least some sort of building professional license or certification. Essentially, we want to ensure that they have a background in the construction and building industry. For existing home, we do require that they have some type of building performance experience, just because a lot of the existing home requirements do look at testing how the home is functioning and ensuring that either it's working and is as efficient as we're looking for, or helping to identify those upgrades that need to take place. And that's the same on multifamily, but then the multifamily raters, we do require that those for existing home have some sort of multifamily building experience. If an individual wants to go through GreenPoint Rated, they would hire a third-party rater. The rater would fill out the GreenPoint Rated checklist with them and identify which measures they want to obtain. Once the project is undergoing construction, or if it's complete, they would go out and obtain that documentation. It can either be photos. Some of the measures we require spec sheets, but just obtaining that documentation to ensure that it was actually done. They would then submit that to us, where we would review it. And if we agree that the verification was done correctly and the measures were performed as the intent was, we then issue them the certification packet. We have certified GreenPoint raters in our professional directory. This is on our website, just under the directories and resources. And then one can filter the type of raters they're looking for, as well as any other certifications the individual has. We also have a Green Home Calculator. The Green Home Calculator, it does kind of a basic assessment of a home and kind of tells you how well it's functioning and the types of upgrades that can be done. It's pretty easy to fill out. It's at greenpointrated.com/calculator. And you just put in your zip code, the square footage, when it was built, as well as the information around how many bedrooms and bathrooms it has. This one is complete, but we have a few different sections, such as like the interior, the exterior appliances, bath, and the summary. And it are taken all of those inputs and kind of tell you how green it is, what types of improvements can be done. I strongly recommend looking at this because it's extremely helpful to get an idea of kind of improvements one can do with their existing home. With existing home upgrades, one can obtain rebates from, for example, utility programs. This is just an example of some of the rebates that are available right now. Through Southern California Edison, they're strongly promoting heat pumps, both for water heaters and HVAC. And then PG&E is also providing some rebates for heat pumps as well as Energy Star smart thermostats. That's it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, but we can also spend some time to have a Q&A.
Thank you, Kurt. There was actually an earlier question about the plug and play system. And if you will allow me to share the screen, I'll show the checklist and maybe you can comment on how people can select which point they can kind of target.
Yeah.
That's one of my earlier projects. So you might have already a more recent version, but I think it kind of shows where you can go, like the minimum by community measure and the maximum by community measure and the possible points, right?
Yeah, so this is an example of one of our checklists. You can see that we have quite a few measures that can potentially be obtained. You can see that first one there is just the CALGreen requirement, and it's required, it has to be done, it's code. But then all of the other ones that do not have the required in there are, quote unquote, optional measures that you would go through, try to select if it can be applicable to your project. And then you can see the number of points in that kind of right-hand column there that the measure provides. There is a few different columns based on the category. So, under section A, site, those can range from the community, if that's the smart water street design, all the way to 3 points under water for the storm water control performance path. And we require a minimum amount of points be obtained in each of those categories to obtain the certification, as well as just an overall requirement of 50 for new home.
Yeah, I think I will not scroll down because it is really 3 pages of questions which you could target with a yes, no, or try to. Was there any?
We got a question about green buildings have lower construction costs. Yeah, a lot of that has to do with, it's much more applicable to like production builders. If they are able to really design green building into their planning process, they can see lower construction costs primarily due to resource conservation. We really strive to have them plan to diminish the waste that they generate. So for example, if a builder is able to really incorporate prefabricated panels and kind of off-site construction within like the factory and have it shipped over, that really reduces a lot of the waste and can lead to lower construction costs.
There is also a question if the categories within the GreenPoint checklist include methods to satisfy the measure.
Yeah, we don't have it within just the checklist, but we do have an accompanying manual that goes much deeper into each of those measures. It talks about, the intent of the measure, it describes some of the requirements to obtain the measure, as well as examples of what would qualify a project for it. So we have that available as well. It's not within the same document, but it's the main kind of reference manual.
And there is a request to receive slides after the presentation, if possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Will you share? Okay, then I'll share with the rest of the group. Yeah, and I think the main point here is that it is really a trade-off between what you as a homeowner believe in and which measure you decide to go for, and also always how much it will cost, because there is also a cost component, right? Because some things you would like to do, but it is not just cost effective, like rainwater collection, right? Like five years ago, it was just cost prohibitive because the tanks were expensive, etc. Fast forward 5 years, now we have water tanks that are 500 for this huge gallon amount, and it's much easier to implement. So I think it's. Do you think the GreenPoint Rated will guide the homeowner towards like the best solution in the space?
I believe so. We have, quite a lot of different pathways that one can take within a project to kind of maximize how efficient it is. And, you can take things into account like if something like rainwater harvesting is cost prohibitive, that's not something you necessarily have to do. It's, again, an optional measure, but it's kind of something we offer as if you do it, we're going to recognize it and give you points to really show that you went above and beyond.
Kurt, I think there is one more question about CALGreen versus GPR.
Yeah.
I'm muting myself. My neighbors are doing something very loud about, so apologize.
Yeah, no problem. What does reserved mean? Yeah, a lot of those sections are just kind of placeholders for the state to fill in at a later date if they need to. It's not something that it's just essentially a placeholder. Do we try to fill in these sections? Not really. We're kind of going above what's required. Obviously, we do have measures that are not even incorporated in CALGreen. If CALGreen wants to incorporate those at a later date, they potentially can. And we see that. So ever since we've kind of been out at the same time as CALGreen, we've often seen that during each code cycle, CALGreen will go a little bit deeper into what they require. And we do see some of the measures that we have within GreenPoint Rated be adopted by CALGreen.
And also, I think you've mentioned that before that there are some measures that you've actually retired from the checklist, and there are some that you want to bring in. Would you mind commenting on that?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the update process too, we coordinate, especially with the new home, we revise our checklist when CALGreen is being revised, just to ensure that we're staying kind of ahead of the curve, if you would. We've had some measures that are just no longer applicable. The biggest one I can think of is low mercury content compact fluorescent lights. Those have all essentially been replaced by LEDs. At this point, they're much more efficient and safer for the environment. So we've, obviously don't support that type of measure anymore. But as new technologies come in, we definitely tried to promote it. Like when LEDs are now came around and they're much more obtainable, we're really pushing those. Smart thermostats are another one. That's a fairly new recognition by Energy Store and something that we recognize if that's being implemented in the project.
Thank you. I believe we have almost run out of, well, we have just run out of questions. So just as a kind of wrap up, this is the image that I really love because it really shows the way we'll look at the systems. Obviously, we have discussed a lot today about CALGreen, Title 24, and GreenPoint Rated. Next event is actually digging into a bit of how to get whatever was unpermitted into the permitted category. So feel free to join if you're interested in something like this, or if your neighbors are interested in something like this. With this, since I don't see any questions, I would like to thank Kurt for talking to us today, for letting us know what's the difference between those two systems. And I will share the slides with everyone as soon as I see it from Kurt, I think. Yeah, and there are more thanks in the chat for you, Kurt. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day. It was a pleasure to have you here today.